Hi guys, this is Steven from Randotopia, and I want to show you a game by Mikhail Tal against Yevgeny Vasiukov from the USSR Championship of 1964. And the amazing thing about this game is that Mikhail Tal, in his great book, The Life and Games of Mikhail Tal, commentated on this one, and we will come back to the comment when the critical position is reached. And I haven't seen this game commentated on YouTube yet, so that's also a reason why I want to do it. So let's start. Mikhail Tal played e4, c6, knight c3, d5, d4, d takes e4, and we have the Caro-Kann opening. Knight takes e4 and knight d7. So Vasiukov played the Karpov variation of the Caro-Kann. But of course, at the time, in 1964, this variation was not called Karpov variation. And actually, I don't know whether it had a name by the time. So let's see. Now, knight f3, knight gf6, knight g3, e6, bishop d3, c5, castles, c takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop c5, and Tal retreated his knight to f3, castles, queen e2. Now Vasiukov played b6 to fianchetto his c8 bishop, bishop f4, bishop b7, rook a1, sorry, and knight e5 attacking the bishop on f4, so bishop g5. The queen is attacked, goes to c7, and now knight h5 by Tal. So Tal obviously goes on the attack, and well, it's already the 15th move, so of course Tal was under pressure already. He thought, now let's go. And Vasiukov, of course, he was afraid, I guess. He played king h8 and bishop e4, f6 now, bishop h4, bishop d6, and c4, attacking the knight on d5. And Vasiukov played bishop a6, so he's pinning the pawn on c4. And now, in this position, let's go to the commentary by the man himself, Mikhail Tal. And of course, there's no one who could explain his thought process better than the magician from Riga. So let's see. Tal writes, "We reached a very complicated position, where I was intending to sacrifice a knight. The sacrifice was not altogether obvious, and there were a large number of possible variations. But when I conscientiously began to work through them, I found to my horror that nothing would come of it. Ideas piled up one after another. I would transport a subtle reply by my opponent, which worked in one case, to another situation where it would naturally prove to be quite useless. As a result, my head became filled with a completely chaotic pile of all sorts of moves, and the famous tree of variations, from which the trainers recommend that you cut off the small branches, in this case spread with unbelievable rapidity. Then suddenly, for some reason, I remembered the classic couplet by Korny Ivanovich Zhukovsky. Oh, what a difficult job it was to drag out of the marsh the hippopotamus. I don't know from what associations this hippopotamus got onto the chessboard, but although the spectators were convinced that I was continuing to study the position, I, despite my humanitarian education, was trying at this time to work out just how would you drag a hippopotamus out of a marsh. I remember how jacks figured in my thoughts, as well as levers, helicopters, and even a rope ladder. After lengthy consideration, I admitted defeat as an engineer, and thought spitefully, well, let it drown. Suddenly, the hippopotamus disappeared, went from the chessboard just as he had come on, of his own accord. Straight away, the position did not appear to be so complicated. I somehow realized that it was not possible to calculate all the variations, and that the knight sacrifice was, by its very nature, purely intuitive. Since it promised an interesting game, I could not refrain from making it. The following day, it was with pleasure that I read in the paper how Mikhail Tal, after carefully thinking over the position for 40 moves, made an accurately calculated piece sacrifice. So now, the piece sacrifice Mikhail Tal made was knight takes g7. And of course, you can't leave that knight on g7. It's also threatening e6, and it already took the important pawn on g7, so at least you have to take the piece. So that's what Vasiukov tried. So he took with his king. And now Tal played knight e4, threatening the pawn on e6, and there would be a family fork. So Vasiukov played knight c5, defending the e6 pawn. But now Tal played queen g4 check, king h8, and now knight takes e6. Yeah. So in this position, of course, there's also a big fork. So Vasiukov had to take on e6 with his knight, what he did, and Mikhail Tal played queen takes e6. So now in this position, you might ask yourself, maybe black could save his knight on d5. But the problem is, I already checked this variation, so I looked at just a move like knight f4, for example, attacking the queen. But the problem is, the rook is hanging on a8, and also the f6 pawn is not defended anymore. So there would follow bishop takes f6 check, rook takes f6, and now really the queen takes on f6 with check, and you have some, well, you have some possibilities here, like queen g7, maybe. Let's just see, queen g7, just for argument's sake, but you could just take the queen, king takes back, and now at the end the rook is falling. And now white has two rooks for two minor pieces, so that's of course not very good. And so it seems that there was no way to save the knight. So what Vasiukov did makes perfect sense. So he wanted to save the rook on a8. So he plays rook ae8, attacking the queen, and the queen takes the loose piece on d5. So now it's Vasiukov's turn. So he has waited all the time to make an attacking move, and now that's what he does. So he takes on h2 with check, and only move king h1. And now he plays queen f4, attacking both bishops on h4 and e4. So Tal played queen h5, and well, the bishop on e4 is loose, so Vasiukov he takes it with the queen, and now rook fe1. So now not only the queen is threatened, but also the bishop on h2 and the rook on e8. So the queen goes to g6, so it interferes with the queen's attack on e8 at least. So Tal didn't see anything better than exchanging the queens. Of course, he would like to go on keep up the attack, but it didn't seem to be possible. So he just exchanged the queens and now took on f6 with check and king g8, and now exchanged rooks on e8. Rook takes e8, and in the end took the bishop on h2. So king takes h2, and well, now at the moment Tal is 2 pawns up, so Vasiukov decided to take the pawn on c4, bishop takes c4. And now after all those complications, Tal is remaining a pawn up in the endgame. So that's pretty funny. And now Tal played queen d7. No, the queens are off the board, I guess. So this is rook d7, and well, Vasiukov attacked the bishop on f6, retreats to c3, and now he takes on a2, and Mikhail Tal took on a7. So still he's a pawn up, and it's an endgame of opposite colored bishops. So well, the task for the defender might be a little easier, but well, the two rooks are the problem, because of course the opposite colored bishops they tend to be drawish normally, but with the rooks on the board, it's a different story. So now Vasiukov played bishop c4, and Tal is bringing his king forward. So now bishop d5, keeping an eye on the g2 pawn, and now f3, king f8, bishop d4 attacking the b6 pawn, so b5, and king f4, king is marching forward, bishop c4, and king g5. Vasiukov played king e8, and now check, king f7, rook a7 check, king e8 again, and now b4, fixing the pawns on the queen side. So bishop d5, attacking the f3 pawn, so the advanced g4 is not possible at the moment. So Tal plays rook a3 to protect the f3 pawn, and now king f7 and g4. Now that the pawn is protected, g4 is possible, and Vasiukov played rook e2, bishop c5, rook e5 check, king h6, and rook e6. Now Tal attacked the bishop, rook d3, and bishop c6. Now rook d8, rook e8, rook d4 again, and rook e6. So now at the moment black is just trying to keep everything under control, but of course Tal is putting a lot of pressure on him. So now he advances his pawns. He plays f4, king e8, and king g7. Now the king is coming, and it's getting more and more difficult for black to defend the position. Now bishop e4 and bishop b6, and now this is an interesting moment. Now black plays bishop f3, and white played rook d8 check, king e7 only move, and now rook d3 attacking the bishop. But now, well, you might ask, why can't the bishop just take the pawn on g4? And we can look at the variation. Now, bishop takes g4, there would follow bishop d8 check, king e8, and bishop g5. And now, in this position, there's no way to stop the mate on d8. So you can only sacrifice the knight, the rook, the rook on e7, which of course would be pretty senseless. So, and there's no way to bring the bishop back to the defense because it's blocked by the rook. So let's just give a move like rook e2, and there would just be wer Schach spielt, muss mit Matt rechnen. He who plays chess must consider being mated, I guess, would be the translation. Now, yeah, so that's the reason why the bishop couldn't take on g4. So now bishop e2 was played, attacking the rook, and now bishop d8 check, king e8, rook d2, attacking the bishop again, and now rook e3 and bishop g5. And now again this mate is threatened, so Vasiukov interfered with his bishop on d3. But now Mikhail Tal played f5, and Vasiukov resigned in this position. Because everything is attacked. The bishop attacks e3, the rook has to protect the bishop on d3, the bishop can't move because of the mate, which we saw before, and really, and also f6 is threatened, and the pawn is pretty much unstoppable. You can't defend against all the threats. So even in this endgame, Mikhail Tal finds a lot of ways to torture his opponent, and well, one could say Mikhail Tal is an attacking player who plays sacrificial attacks again and again and again, but really, I think his endgame play is also very, very good. So I hope you enjoyed this game, and have a nice day. Bye bye.